Hello, this video is for anyone studying Joseph Conrad's novel The Heart of Darkness. Now, I don't believe that you can study Conrad's novel without looking at Chinua Achebe's critique of it. So I'll be talking a lot about Chinua Achebe's essay, and I'll post links to his essay down below in the comments box so you can see what I'm talking about. Achebe's stated opinion on The Heart of Darkness is that it is an offensive and deplorable book, and that Joseph Conrad himself is a thoroughgoing racist. There are a number of reasons he thinks this, but the three that I'll focus on are that Kurtz is presented as a hero, even though he's the worst kind of colonialist. Secondly, that the Africans or non-Europeans in the novel are dehumanized and presented as uncivilized. Moreover, they are silent and aren't given a voice. And finally, that Africa itself is presented as a foil to Europe, and it's presented as uncivilized, pre-civilized, and a place of blank space, or even darkness, as the title suggests. I'll deal with each of these in turn now, or at least I'll try to. First, let's look at the character of Kurtz. This is the least strongly expressed criticism of Conrad's novel by Achebe, and I think that's appropriate because I think it's also the weakest criticism. Nevertheless, Conrad's critics have picked up on the fact that Marlow repeats throughout the novel that Kurtz is a remarkable man, and they've used this to argue that Conrad portrays Kurtz as a hero. But I think if you read the novel in any great detail, you'll know that Kurtz is not a hero. He's corrupt, he's unhappy, and his demise at the end of the novel is anything but heroic. Secondly, let's talk about the accusation levelled at Conrad that his descriptions of African people in his novel are racist, that he leaves them without agency, without a voice, and without subjecthood, that he dehumanises them. One of the main reasons that his critics suggest this is because there isn't a single piece of dialogue spoken by an African character in the novel. This can't be disputed. You won't find a single word spoken by an African character. However, there is one instant that shows us that an African character can have agency. Kurtz's girlfriend. She got in one day and kicked up a row. She talked like a fury to Kurtz for an hour. Even though we don't hear what she's saying, she clearly has a voice and she clearly has agency. It's up to you to decide whether this one incident is enough, or you might find incidents of your own that counteract the claim that Conrad's African characters are silent. Secondly, Conrad's descriptions of Africans are often dehumanizing. He describes them as faceless, and when he does describe their faces, he often describes them as ugly. He uses words like creature and phantom to describe the characters that Marlow comes across on his journey. It's up to you to decide whether Conrad's use of a narrator, Marlow, to describe what he sees makes the novel racist, or does it make the character Marlow racist? That's up to you. Finally, Cedric Watts, who has provided a defense of Conrad's novel, claims that, of all the people described, by far the happiest, healthiest, and most vital are the group of blacks seen paddling their canoes through the surf of the coast. He claims that this description of happy, healthy, and vital African people is enough to show that Conrad was not a racist and actually liked African people. Marlow, the narrator, is without doubt a colonialist. He travels into Africa and makes his money from the natural resources there. He describes Africa as a blank space, the biggest, the most blank on Earth. So he sees Africa as empty and just waiting to be filled by European influence. This was, of course, a very common view at the time. Colonialists felt Africa needed them and that they were doing Africa a favour by entering. Obviously, we know now that there were many humanitarian atrocities committed in Africa, particularly in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which most people see as the setting for this novel. Marlow also says that going up that river was like travelling back to the earliest beginnings of the world. Achebe and Conrad's other critics have been quick to criticise this idea that Africa was prehistoric and that it was in some kind of developmental phase prior to Europe, and that all it needed was for Europeans to come and speed up its development. It's up to you to decide whether this is strongly problematic and whether we should stop studying novels like Conrad's Heart of Darkness, because it propagates this idea that Africans need Europeans to help them to develop, to help them to get out of their prehistoric, uncivilized space. Finally, it's up to you to think about and to decide whether you forgive Conrad for the shortcomings of his novel, based on the historical period that he was writing in. After all, Achebe admits, it was certainly not his fault that he lived his life at a time when the reputation of the black man was at a particularly low level. Conrad was surrounded by colonialists who believed they were doing the right thing in Africa. He was surrounded by people like Marlow, who would have gone into Africa trying to make money and not caring about the human suffering that they found or caused. Or do you think, like Achebe, that we should be highly critical of this novel and that we should criticise, even though it was based in a historical time when these attitudes might have been acceptable, they are not acceptable now and we have to evaluate them thusly? That's up to you. As always, I'd like to hear your comments. I'm sure I've missed lots of things. I'm sure there's lots of things that you disagree with me about, so feel free to comment below. See you next time.